Ladies and gentlemen, this is Michael Dean. We are here live in Minneapolis. I'm at the Podcast Mini. That's what we call it, Podcast Minneapolis, Podcast Juice. But no, this is the Prince Podcast, and I'm joined today by Duane Tudahl. And of course, for you hardcore Prince fans, and maybe some of you not so hardcore, you are knowing that he is the author of an upcoming Prince book called Prince and the Purple Rain Era Studio Sessions. Already I'm just feeling like, I gotta get this book. This sounds like it's just gonna be so good. But I am joined today with Duane. You are here, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Very excited to be here.
So there was a trailer that came out that you had a hand in, right?
Yes. We're right now we're trying to do something that we're trying to find ways to get these stories out from everybody. Everybody has all the people that worked for Paisley Park have their stories to tell.
Yeah.
And if Susan Rogers said something very astute, where she said, if everybody tells their story, we can sort of put together an idea of what Prince was like. We'll never get the real guy, but if everybody tells their truth, we can see a bigger picture of what this man was. And I think that's vital, is make sure that everybody tells the truth. And so what we've done is we've gone back and talked to a lot of people, and this is what I've been doing for years with different projects, is finding ways to tell the story of Prince and in a way that respects and honors him and pushes it to the next level.
And with that said, this book you got coming out, Prince, I want to make sure Prince and the Purple Rain Era Studio Sessions. Now it's 1983, 84.
Yes,
part of it? Okay.
Yes.
That's important.
The title, I would love to have had a simpler title. I would love to have had Prince in the Studio, but that was taken.
Right.
And we went back and forth with the publisher. This was the hybrid we came up with. It has Purple Rain. It explains that this is when they were recording Purple Rain, but this is also, basically the book goes from January 1st, 1983 to December 31st, 1984. Literally a 2-year period. Okay. And it tells the story of him going from being the critical darling that he was before the popularity of 1999, the release of 1999, which was before the book started, but it starts off with him mid-tour of the 1999 tour, and it's not, the album sales are not doing great. The album is on its way down. Okay. He had already released an album at the time that was on its way down, and the Vanity 6 album was on its way down. So it's like it had peaked, it was going down, and they weren't sure where it was going to go. And it goes from there to the success of Little Red Corvette coming out, 1999 being re-released, and him becoming big, and then Purple Rain, which, as you know, was a little movie he did, and he became a little bigger, and it's all the things involved in this. And the nutty thing about this is it's about a guy who wanted the world and worked for it. This is a guy who worked hard for it, and he got the world, and then at the end he wasn't necessarily happy with it, and he didn't want to be Mr. Purple Rain. He just said, you know what? By the end of December of '84, which Purple Rain was released in '84, he pretty much said, I don't want to be Mr. Purple Rain. I'm done. And within 4 months the tour was over, and he'd come out with his next album. Okay. So it's the story of getting everything you want and then realizing you can either compromise your standards or you can be an artist. And
this has a unique take on it because, I'm looking at some of the book here. This is told, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, almost on a day-by-day sort of chronological order.
Right. The idea of this came from, I worked on a book called The Vault.
Yes.
I don't know if you know that book.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
No, look, I heard about it.
I worked for a magazine called Uptown. Mm-hmm. Uptown was a bunch of Prince fanboys. We all liked Prince, and Pierre Nelson was kind of heading it up, who wrote DMSR, and it's kind of, that was sort of the Bible for us. And we all worked on that. And you see my credit in the beginning of DMSR. Okay. And then we did The Vault. And The Vault was the book of trying to do a daily basis of what he did. And during that time, Pierre and I were talking about, it's Pierre or Purr. I've never known which one it was.
I was going to ask you that.
It's good. I think it's Pierre, but I've heard both ways. I think he told me before, and I forget since then, because we've only dealt with each other for 25 years on the internet. That's it. Wow. Never actually spoken, never seen each other. But he and I talked about doing a studio book, and we laughed because we thought this would be Herculean. There's no way that this could be done. And I had gotten all the work orders from Sunset Sound, which is where Prince was recording for a lot of his stuff. I just walked in there and talked to them and interviewed the owners or the managers. And as I'm talking to them, I said, do you know the dates of this stuff? And they said, well, you want to see them? And I was like, yeah. Wow. And so he let me in, and I made copies of this. He won't do this now, I'm sure, but he made copies of all the stuff. Mm-hmm. I did. And with some stipulations, what I can talk about, what I can't, and which is very fair because he was doing this, and I'm they've been exceptional to me, and I've gone back to them several times for questions. They've been really good about answering stuff. But I was able to find out through the work orders all the engineers that worked on the stuff, all the dates, even the times, to be able to say, oh yeah, he was working on that mix of Possessed on April 25th, 1984. That was the instrumental that ended up being the movie. So when you can look through dates like that, you're going, oh, whoa, I can see at 2 a.m. he started working on this song, and that's nuts.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna jump around here a little bit because you just said something that's fascinating to me. You could see the times when he was working. What, if you can remember? I know there's a lot here in the book. Do you remember anything that just jumped out at you? Like, wow, he was doing this song on this particular day.
Well, April 25th things. That's my birthday, so that's why I was like going. That's why I remember that one. But I've actually gotten to be a bit of a. I know a lot of this stuff now. Mm-hmm. It's like been drilled into me because I'm going over and over. And I mean, just focus on the first book. There may be more depending on how well this book goes out. But yeah, there's things I'm going, oh, I see, and you start comparing things to where he was doing things. You go, oh wait, he was doing this, and then the Olympics happened the next day in Los Angeles. He was out of town for that week, so you're going, okay, got it. Or he flew in just for this, or wait, he was here and he performed in Minneapolis that next night. He must have gone home then, or you could see when he was traveling, when he was doing things, and stories he told about. Well, I went out and saw, and there's a story that he wrote, Erotic City after seeing
George Clinton.
Yeah, now that's a story he's told, but I don't think that's accurate.
Okay,
it's a great story,
right?
But the interesting thing about Prince is, and I haven't interviewed him, so I will say that right away. But since I couldn't interview him, and I never even approached him, I interviewed everybody around him that I could. And he also is a bit of a prankster, and would say things and makes his history as he wants it. And he probably did see George Clinton and P-Funk singing all this stuff, and knee deep, jamming to that. I don't doubt that. But the concert he saw was on a year earlier. And so it's like, okay, and I looked in the papers and I couldn't find a P-Funk concert. In fact, they were playing somewhere else when he was recording that. So I don't know. I just, either he's mistaken or maybe he wrote it and then didn't do anything with it for a year. I doubt that's the case. But
or maybe I'm speculating. He remembered that show and it's like,
could be, yeah. I mean, the thing is, who knows what sparks in Inspirado? You never know. And that's the other thing is people talk about, was this song inspired by this person? Was this song, and there's been a bunch of controversy lately about, was this song? And I think that the best way to look at it is any sort of painter or artist or musician is inspired by the world. And yeah, they may see little things and they may pull a little piece of this and a little piece of that, just like a good chef may say, you know what, I tried this and I add a little wine to this, and it's all a big gumbo. But I don't know if some of this stuff was inspired specifically by one person or one event, but anything could set the guy off. Sure. You could be walking across the floor and your shoes make a noise and you go, wait! And he did that with one song.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something else, that you didn't interview Prince, and you said, I didn't try to approach him. So that would tell me you've been working on this book quite some time. Yeah. And I think it's important to say, because I know a lot of people will say, Prince is passing, people are trying to crank these books out. But talk to me a little bit about that.
That's very true. I started working on this book over 20 years ago.
Wow.
So it's like half my life on this book.
Okay.
I know. I should have been at work. It's like one of the guys waiting in a movie line for Star Wars, for 3 weeks. But it was like that. And about 4 years ago, my wife and I started talking, and she said, is this going to be a hobby? Or is this... Because I've interviewed, like I said, over the time I've interviewed 40 to 50 people for this book. A lot of the revolution is early on, along the way, and every engineer, and and whatnot, and members of Apollonia 6 and the family and the time. And she said, "Are you going to do something with this, or are you going to just make this a hobby?" And I realized, this is a book, and I want to come out with this. And this was 3 or 4 years before it passed. And then last year, 2016, my wife's, I wasn't working for a few weeks. I was in between 2 jobs. I do freelance producing and editing for TV shows. Oh. And so I had a few weeks off, and she said, "Don't do anything." It was kind of nice. Don't do chores. Don't paint the house. Right now, focus on the book, get it done. And so I had until like mid-March, and I just sat every day. Wow. It was my thing.
You're working like a job.
Exactly. It was my job. And I got it done, and about March 15th I got it done. And so I was excited. And then a month later, Prince passed. And the reason why I didn't approach him was because, first off, he's pretty litigious. And I didn't want to have him start putting up roadblocks. I wanted to get it. I figured it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And I didn't want him saying, whatever it was. And also I thought it was a book that honored him. That was the other thing, is I really wanted to make sure it was something, because I wrote it knowing that he could sue. So I made sure I didn't say anything bad in it. Okay. It's a book by somebody who loves the music. It's the book I wanted to read. It's the bottom line. When I think about books, I've read just like you, I've read every Prince book out there. Some are good, some are really good, and some are, to me, off the mark. They just they don't.
I got you.
You get it. And some I look at and go, they interviewed one person, and you're going, wait, there's so much bigger stories to tell. And so I wanted to have as many voices in there as possible. So I have, them telling their stories. And sometimes it's from my interviews. Sometimes I use stuff from your shows. Okay. Susan Rogers, who I've interviewed many times, she has great quotes in a lot of different places. I use quotes from her, but I put them all in perspective. And some people I wasn't able to get, but they talked enough in the public eye that I was able to use their quotes. But most of it's the dates that I have from the work orders from what Prince did and what days. And that's basically the skeleton of the book. And all the interviews and all the recollections are the meat that I hang on the skeleton to make the body.
Wow.
That's how it is.
So this book, again, let me know if I'm wrong. So this probably encompasses, I'm going to say, I'm going by albums. Mm-hmm. Purple Rain,
yes,
right? Ice Cream Castles,
yes.
Apollonia 6,
yes.
The Glamorous Life album.
Yes.
And I would dare say probably songs off of Around the World in a Day.
Almost in the entire Around the World. The cool thing about this is it all those albums and also the family.
Okay.
Outtakes, Stand Back, I talk about.
Okay.
Manic Monday, Sugar Rolls, a bunch of outtakes that never made it out. Some are now released. I still call them outtakes, but they're on the Purple Rain Deluxe. Mm-hmm. And also some other songs that still aren't out. A song called Moral Majority, a song called several other songs that are not out there. We're still a longer version of 17 Days are all talked about in this book. So it's a book for people that enjoy the music but want to know what's going on. And it sort of put it in perspective. Basically, the book starts off with a quote by Prince that says, "All my life is in my records." Hmm. And if you look at it, you realize that all of his moods and all of his the good and bad of his life are in his music. He's in a good mood, does this stuff. Mm-hmm. In a bad mood, does an angry song. And he's in a great mood. And you look at like the album Purple Rain, he has a lot of embracing other people. I would die for you. Let's go crazy. It's all these different things of collective. And I think that he was like that at that point, and so that's where that comes from.
Wow, if you just think about that, I know you have, but 1983 to 84, that's just a 1 year period.
Here is and I agree that
there's a lot of work.
The beginning of January of 84 through August of 84, he recorded almost all of the time Ice Cream Castle's album. Actually, Ice Cream Castle. Okay. I think which one was what. I was figuring which was what. Yeah, but the time album, some of Purple Rain, 2 songs of Purple Rain, the Apollonia 6 album, the Sheila album, the Family album, and that was all within that time period. I mean, within months. And this is also during this 2 year period, he played over 100 days on stage because he did 2 tours during that time,
Okay.
as well as one-off shows that he did. He did a movie.
Right.
And it's all within 2 years. And the guy's like 25, 26 years old, 24, 26 years old. You're looking at it going, I was an idiot at that time. I can't imagine having
Right.
having a machine like that working. So he had to have these people around him that were feeding his machine, to make sure that what he was doing was, he had music to go out. And every project, and he'd meet somebody and say, Dad, you want a song? Modern Airs. Okay, great. This person wants a song. Oh, Sheenie Easton wants a song? Sure, Sugar Walls. And that kind of stuff. You look at what he did. And also the songs that didn't come out for years. You're like going, nobody does that.
Yeah, just those first 3, the Ice Cream Castle, Purple Rain, Apollonia 6, and I guess Glamorous Life. And then having a movie, that would be a person's career, right?
Yeah.
And then when I think of it as a fan, I think of so when you get to the family, and just the difference or the feel of that production of the music as opposed to, I'd be like, that's some of the songs I could hear. Okay, there are little similarities, but it's on a different sort of plane.
The cool thing about the family is, it was in the ashes of the time breaking up. Mm-hmm. And I think Prince said, I want to rival the time, but not out-time the time. Mm-hmm. He said, I want to do something that's different than time, because I got to show these guys that I don't need them. Right. And that's how he sort of was. And so he created this thing with the family, and he created this beautiful, different sound. And it was recorded in different places. It was recorded at the warehouse. And their setup at the warehouse was very different than Sunset Sound. It was basically an open area with a carpet underneath the mixing board and stuff like this. They had to use headphones. It was very different. And then they bring in Claire Fisher later in the year to add his stuff to it. And once his stuff was added to it, they took out all the DX7s and a lot of things that they had in there that were very heavy, and took out some of the percussion and made it so it's more sweeping and beautiful. And you combine the jazz thing with Claire Fisher, and it was just a different direction. And that's just it's a beautiful album with it just yeah. And then, like you said, different. I mean, you wouldn't even know the same dude.
Yeah,
that's the cool thing.
That's fascinating.
That's why I love him, is because he is able to bring that. If you like certain things, he opens you up to ideas. I would not have thought about certain jazz things at the time. And some people say, Eric.
Not real jazz.
Yeah, exactly. But he grew up in a jazz house.
Right.
His dad was a jazz musician, so I give him. I think he's got enough knowledge of the stuff to be able to do something. Yeah, Madhouse may not have been a jazz album completely, but it was something different. And that's actually not even that in this part. But I think Madhouse came from through the Flesh, and then went back to the Family, because the Family had 2 instrumentals on there as well that were kind of precursors to Madhouse and stuff like that. So I think the Family album is one of those albums that is just forgotten, and it shouldn't be, because it's so damn good.
Well, it should definitely, obviously, all of the Paisley Park stuff should be out there.
Right.
But the Families, that's it's got one of the biggest songs on there,
Right, but just so, to me, unfortunately, it got lost in the shuffle. Yeah. And because they didn't tour, they had one show. And if people get a chance to see F Deluxe, go see them, because they're really good.
I need to see them.
You should see them.
Actually, I think Paul Peterson played last night or something.
Did he?
Yeah, I saw it on Facebook.
We were busy.
Yeah. But we'll meet him tomorrow.
You'll meet him tomorrow.
And the other cool thing about the book, too, and again, remind people, when is the book coming out?
Okay, the book comes out November 15th, give or take a day or two.
Okay.
And it is being published by Roman Littlefield. It's a publisher of educational books. Okay. And
hey, this is educational.
The thing is, it's educational and it's interesting. I think of myself as a funk archivist.
Funk archivist. I like that.
I like to think of myself as doing that, because I love history of music. I love the history of music, and this is kind of digging in and realizing where the stuff comes from, because there's certain things I'm tracing back to distant bands as well. Things like, okay, well, this is sort of where this came from, And I think that's kind of fun, and hearing all the different perspectives on where these songs came from. What I wanted to do was not just tell what was recorded when and where, but why.
Okay.
And that's the interesting thing to me, is when you start realizing, oh, he says this in this song. Well, the day before he recorded Jungle Love. That's why in this song he says, "It's a jungle in here," and you're like going, oh, and you start seeing the different, and to me that adds an element of life to the song. And when you picture the Revolution playing America, they're all basically in the room, all just jamming, and everybody's having a good time, just stepping forward, doing their stuff, and it's a big jam, and you hear how good the Revolution was. That, when you know this, it makes it that much better. But also knowing that there were times that he just would go in the studio by himself and come out with, beautiful ones. And you're sitting there going, that's what happens when you go in the studio for 24 hours. Oh!
Okay.
Nobody else does that.
Wow.
Nobody else does that.
Now, let me ask you this. People say that, was there literally a 24-hour session?
There's been sessions that were like that. And there's been sessions that he's had engineers there for long. None were in this book, but I know of Susan Rogers did a 96-hour session when she was breaking down a studio and putting it back up. But that was in Minneapolis. None that were that long, but there were some that you go into the next day, long into the next day, and again he'll wear you down, because he'll go home and sleep, and then he'll say, okay, I need you back in here. Like with Manic Monday, he called Peggy and said, I had a dream and I want to record it, and so meet me back in the studio. And she gets there and waits, and he finally shows up, and then sometimes he'll leave and go to a movie, and sometimes he'll come back, and she's going, I'm still working on this, man. I'm here for hours, and there's some 20-hour sessions in there, but I haven't seen any go over that in here. But he did that. He did that very much. So.
Talk to me about another cool thing that's notable on the cover, and I've seen already, is the foreword by Questlove.
Questlove.
Yeah. How did that come to play?
The best. A friend of mine knew Questlove, knows Questlove, and said, showed him 2 or 3 pages for the book, and Quest was like, oh my God, I want to see more. So I gave him the whole book, and he wrote me and said, I shouldn't say.
That's okay.
I want to cuss on this thing, but
you can say whatever you want to say.
He said, "This is shit, man. This is the shit." And he and I started talking about things, and back and forth the internet. And God, I love the internet. I don't know how they did this stuff before. I don't know how they did it got around without maps and stuff like that. But I don't know how they did all this stuff without constant contact. But he wanted to be involved in it in some form, and he was such a great guy, and he said, "Yeah, I'll write the foreword for you."
Nice.
And he wrote the foreword, and opened doors at times too, because people say, "Oh, Questlove wrote the foreword." Okay,
right.
And the book was being delivered, and I think partially because of Questlove's, when it came out, when they announced the book, Questlove said on his Twitter page, he tweeted out that. The book was coming out. He's like, this is the book we've all been waiting for. And that's to 1.8 million people. Well, yeah, that's something I can't reach.
Right.
And he blows my mind. and the funny thing is, the whole thing, I hadn't met him. I met him 2-3 weeks ago for the first time.
Okay.
And he's just cool in person.
Wow.
So, yeah, but he was, honestly, he was a godsend to this. And I think that he opened doors for me. Toward the end, I was delivering the book in mid-March of this year, and I had a deadline, and about a week and a half before I went back to every person I interviewed. Okay. And one of the people I interviewed was a guy named David Coleman. David Coleman is Lisa's brother, and he passed away several years ago. Mm-hmm. And I still had to get the permission of his estate. And nobody's really interviewed him. And so he was really involved with influencing Prince, with the finger symbols, right, and all that stuff is from him. He exactly wrote the song. And he told me all the stories about that. And so I had to go through, I contacted Lisa, who I've known for a few years, and I asked her and talked to her dad, and they got permission. But then Lisa said, would you like to talk to me? And I'm like, yeah. And literally so I talked to Lisa, and we did back and forth on the internet, and she was fantastic with that, and answered questions a lot about her brother. Okay. And then I got in touch with Susanna through a mutual friend, and who's Wendy's sister. And then Susanna and I talked for like 8 hours. Nice. And then she said, "Do you want to talk to Wendy?" Yeah. And literally Wendy's interview came in 2 days before I was delivering the book.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, but I was learning, yes, I do want this. And she gave me some time, and I got some great stuff from her. And I think some of the stuff, like I said, some of the stuff may have come from Questlove being attached. But even before, I think he liked it, and then him being attached just
puts a cold sign on it to say, hey,
yeah,
this, you need to get
exactly. Take this guy seriously. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I can't, he didn't know me. So for him to say that is just incredibly cool. I can't say enough wonderful things about the guy.
Well, shout out to Questlove.
Seriously.
We need to have you on this show, sir.
Oh, he's the best. He's great.
Arsenio, I'm shouting you out too. All right. Yeah, you kind of threw me off there. What I was going to ask you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, some of the people that I interviewed, Albert Magnoli, mm-hmm. who I've seen interview but doesn't interview as much, and he and I we're great friends now, and we spent the first time I said I want to spend about 15, 20 minutes talking to him. We talked for 8 hours. Oh, wow. And literally it was a full shift of talking. I'm taping the whole thing and then transcribing the whole thing. Oh, wow. He was exceptional, and he was so good, and he said, "You have any follow-ups, anything, tell me." And then he came out to town, and we had lunch, and he invited me to there was a screening of Purple Rain last year, okay. And he invited me to that, nice. And that was great because Jill Jones was on stage, and Apollonia, and Jerome, and Bob Cavallo was on stage, and then he said to Bob Cavallo, "You got to talk to this kid." So nice. Bob Cavallo talks to me, okay. And it just seemed to keep growing, mm-hmm. And I had people like Brenda Bennett over the house, who was from Apollonia 6 and Vanity 6, and you're just going, I have the coolest job ever. I get to talk to all these people, and they tell me these stories, and,
right.
and I find a way to put in a book. And okay. Like I said, and so many of them, Jill, as you know, is cool, and Susanna's great, and Wendy and Lisa were fantastic, and Matt Fink and Brown Mark and everything. Bobby's the only one I wasn't able to interview. I went to talk to him, but it was right after there was some things that a TV show had come out that had nothing to do with me, but had quotes by Andre and some other people, and everybody was like, it just didn't look good. It was like those guys got tricked, mm-hmm. And I think Bobby was a little cautious. Bobby is he's the heartbeat of the revolution, really, and I think he wants to make sure that his Prince's legacy is maintained. Gotcha. And so he didn't know me, and I get it. I'm totally fine with that. I'm hoping after the book, I'm still going to give him a book. I want him to. He's in it. I use quotes from him from other places, but he was protecting Prince's legacy because he doesn't know who I am, and I completely respect that. So there were some people that decided not to interview, and some people changed their minds after Prince passed.
Okay.
And that made sense too. And some people came forward. It's like that changed. The hardest thing for me when Prince passed, obviously I'm a huge fan, but the hardest thing for me was going through the book and changing all of the Prince is to Prince was.
Wow.
That it broke my heart. It's
right.
500 pages of sitting there looking for every time it says Prince is an innovator. Prince is this. Going back and saying Prince was. And wow. I realized that what's going on now is, you're a big fan. It was always the promise of what was coming. The next album is going to be the bomb. This is going to be the one. This is going to be the comeback. This is going to be the big thing. And whatever it was. And what's he going to look like? What's he going to act like with the songs? He's finally going to get that guitar album he's been talking about. Whatever it is. So there was always we weren't really looking back because he was always making us look forward.
Right.
And now we have the chance to kind of go back and say, okay, what did you do? And this is part of that, is retrospective, looking at the effect and the what was involved with all this stuff. And I think that's, to me, it's all we can do now, because we don't have the road is stopped. There's an end of the road, and we have to now go back and reflect on the trip. And that's what this is. So,
just to go back, because I know you're obviously a huge Prince fan. A little one. What got you into Prince? I'm very curious. Like, when you first introduced.
I'll be honest with you. Nobody's listening to this, right?
Just a few people.
Okay, all right. I liked Prince originally because the girls liked Prince.
And I'm not mad at that.
And I wanted to be around girls. And
that just says you have a lot of Mac vibes in you.
I just saw that was the way. And I thought, I like to dance.
Okay.
I like girls. And I like funk music. This is a perfect thing for me. So I started liking that. And I found that the girls that liked Prince, I had something in common with right away. And you're always looking for that plane of reference when, going in the door. And once you start talking about that, you have an excuse to talk 15 minutes, and you can see that you're a good guy. That's why I originally did it.
What time frame is it?
During college, we used to listen to 1999 and Controversy. Right. And then Purple Rain came out, and the summer of Purple Rain was like, you're a little younger than me. I think I'm just a little older than you. So summer of Purple Rain, I was in college.
Okay.
So
I was just starting high school.
I know I look like 15, but so the summer of Purple Rain was '84, and that was the date movie.
Yeah,
that was the date movie. You took somebody out, and your odds were better.
Yeah, that was the the blockbusters that they have today. That was on the level of you had to go see. I mean, my whole school was like, you got to go see Purple Rain. There's no question about it.
Yeah. And I come from a school area that is really integrated. It's got a good mix of everybody. So I got a good chance to understand all the different music types. And we had a station called V103 in Baltimore, which was just a hardcore funk. And so I got educated in that. And so we always, in Baltimore and DC, I grew up in Baltimore, we had a lot of you get a lot of good music in that area. It's a good place, a good time for music. And so it was perfect for me to be around these people and to get into this music, and then, like I said, get to know the girls, and my friends were listening to this, and then Purple Rain came out, and all of a sudden I was no longer the freak just for listening to 1999. I was like, I've always liked them, and then that was really the big thing. As I remember liking Controversy. I didn't really know Dirty Mind at the time. I came in after that, but Controversy, 1999, and then when Purple Rain hit, that was,
What sort of like flipped the switch from being sort of, I like this guy, I like some of this music, to being like, okay.
I am a fan of music. I love, I'm finding out that this guy not only did Prince, he did The Time, did Vanity 6, did all this other stuff, and going, wait, what? He did all that stuff? And then you realize he did it all himself? Oh, okay. Well, he wrote most of it, almost all of it. Dez, I think, wrote some stuff and some things. But yeah, he kind of did. There was something about respecting somebody that can do that. And yeah, Stevie Wonder does somewhat like that, and other people. But there's just something about Prince that, and I think that there was something about his music. His lyrics are fun, not necessarily deep. Always, sometimes they are. But he's not like a Bob Dylan type thing, but there's something about it. But his riffs and his music beds and his the things he would bring to it, and the fact that he switched off every once in a while. All of a sudden, you're like, okay, I think I've got him nailed here. No, you don't. I'm going to do Purple Rain. No, I'm going to do Around the World Today. I'm going to do Parade. Hey, you like that? I'm going to do Sign of the Times. And you just sit there going, oh, wow, you've got a range. And then he'll do an acoustic song, or then he'll do something else, and then he'll do In a Spanish Villa. And you're going, that's nothing like anything you've ever done, and that's hidden on an Apollonia 6 album. Okay, and the other thing to me is I enjoyed collecting.
Oh, okay.
And he was a guy that back then every B-side was different,
right.
And you go, and you can do a whole album of 17 Days, Erotic City, and some of those songs, She's Always in My Hair, are as good as anybody else's stuff,
right? And
you're just going, he threw that away on a B-side. That's crazy. So when I started collecting that stuff, which the Purple Rain era had For the Tears in Your Eyes, right, and all this other stuff, you're just going, that's just so much. And then he comes out with another album before you're even done with this one. He just fed me. That's really what it is. Okay. He fed me.
And that's massive. And then the other piece of Prince to me is the performance, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Which is like, there's nobody doing that on that level.
I missed the Purple Rain tour. Didn't see it.
Okay.
And it just wasn't happening where I was around. And first time I saw him was Love Sexy.
Oh, okay, wow.
Good show. No, great show.
Excellent.
And saw him at the LA Forum, and seeing him in the round, it was just phenomenal. And it blew me away. I was just like,
there's so much going on.
Yeah.
It's
where do you even look?
To take it in, yeah.
You always look at Prince. But then you see off the side Miko shooting baskets, or you're just going.
There's cat. There's
This
stage.
is crazy.
I think it was the first round concert I've ever been to.
It's the first one. It's very tough to do because he had there was a funny story about how he'd get on the stage there if they didn't have the underground passage, which often they didn't. They'd bring him out in a box.
Okay.
They didn't tell people this, but like he would be in a wheeled onto the stage in a equipment box, and he'd sit there for 15, 20 minutes on stage. Or go, they take it on stage, but that's where he'd be. And I thought, that's funny to me. I love those kind of stories. I love hearing the pieces of what made a person, what made him. We all know him as Prince, this icon.
Right.
But hearing people talk about him as a person, like hanging out with somebody, that's just crazy. When you hear that, it's like Elvis. And when you read about Elvis, you're going, oh wait, Elvis had meals? yeah, he did. And same with Prince. And you're just going, that's just nuts. And that was to me the intriguing thing about writing a book like this is finding out that he had weaknesses, he had frailties, he had control issues, but he also was the most creative guy you're ever going to find. And everybody they understood that you accept that he's going to be this creative genius, and that's the ante to be in the room. You ante up, and you accept that he's going to be demanding, going to work harder than anybody else, and you're going to step up to the plate, or you're going to get left behind.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the big thing to me.
So another thing I wanted to ask was, were there songs? Obviously, I know you must be aware of. There's obviously these leak songs, bootlegs, and stuff. You may have heard of these, right?
Outrageous.
Doing your research here, working on the book, were there some songs that jumped out like they still haven't been? I'm sure there's obviously.
Well, I mean, and I say we because I had some friends helping me on this, but who were essential to this. I had a group of people that were really just. Oh my God! Without these guys, I would not have gotten.
You need to shout them out if you can, man. They're listening, like, what the hell? What am I?
Well, Just, Scott, Cam, and Thomas, all guys were just incredible when it came to fact checking this stuff. They would go through everything I wrote, and these guys were just incredible. And then Pierre Nelson read it, and so it was
wow.
A lot of people looking through this thing, making sure it's right. The question was...
Yeah, go ahead. That's them calling out.
Yeah, exactly. You better mention me. What was the question again?
So it was like, where there's some songs...
Oh, yeah. The cool thing is a lot of the songs that are on the Purple Rain Deluxe, I already talked about.
Oh.
I already knew about them, already heard them, and was able to write about them. Nice. So okay. We Can Fuck... several of the other songs were still not out, but I was able to kind of go into detail about these tracks just so I could get as much detail in there as possible. There's still a couple songs that I haven't heard, but I know of that I can talk about because the people who worked on them told me about them. And there's some things that are exciting, and there's some things that are a bit of a letdown. I thought that Katrina's Paper Dolls was a bit of a letdown. It's like, okay, that was one that we'd all kind of heard about and we were all excited about, and they go, oh wait, that's kind of
a funny sort of phenomenon though with some Prince stuff. Not that I'm saying anything bad about WallE, to be clear, but people, this is this thing in your mind, right?
Best thing ever.
It's like, well, it's good, but it's not the best thing ever.
I think there's an exclusivity when you're in that club.
Right.
You get excited.
Right.
And I get it. We've all done this. People are like, you should hear this mix of the Dance Electric. It's the best. Because nobody else has heard it. And then, it's like you want to be the guy that discovers it. And I get it. I don't think.
Me first.
Yeah, well, and I get that. We all, if you discover a band, you want to tell them, no, they're the shit, man. That's just the way we are, and I get it. But I don't think anything on the Purple Rain Deluxe thing changed how much we respect Prince. It's like it added some of it to it, but some of it's kind of throwaway stuff. And you think about the, like I said, the Katrina's Paper Dolls. That was sort of when he'd just gotten done doing When Doves Cry, and he was doing, and you're thinking, what that song? Well, there's a reason why it never came out. But again, as part of his legacy is he can have so much. Sometimes he'd go in the studio for a day and just say, I gotta get something out of my system. And not every joke you tell is great.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. And so there's sometimes he'll tell a joke that doesn't land. And that's what it was. But that said, even his throwaways are better than most people's best stuff. Yeah. So
that's the thing.
You're not going to hear me ranking on.
Oh no, I'm not trying to.
No, I know.
Well, just to jump into the conversation of this real quick, what are your thoughts on the Purple Rain Deluxe release?
I like it.
Okay.
A great deal. I don't. It could have been better. It could have had the long version of 17 Days on it. Could have done things like that. I know. What it did was hopefully open doors. I'm hoping that that Warner Brothers says, you know what, we should do a Sign of the Times one. We should do a 1999 one. We should do a, And I wrote an article for The Current about this. I kind of reviewed all the unreleased songs because that's mostly what we all went to that disc. Mm-hmm. You don't go to the edits disc or the remastered disc. I don't know if I've listened to the remastered yet. Because I'm like, I know the album. I think I've listened to it once, but it was the outtakes that that's the disc, and that's the disc that hopefully falls out of this poorly made cardboard thing they had first. But I think that it was. I'm glad they came out with it. Mm-hmm. It was. There's some songs on it that really are happy that I'm happy Weekend Fox out there. I'm happy that some of the stuff's out there. I wish the credits would have been better. Mm-hmm. I wish they'd done some more research on when some of this stuff was recorded. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that I get involved with some of the things in the future. But
I want to ask you, and again, I'm not saying that you are involved in working on that, but I'm just asking your opinion because you have this book and you've done a lot of research. Why do you think that there was sort of these issues with some of this?
It took me 20 years to find this stuff.
Okay.
So, but Warner Brothers would have this stuff on file. It's just, here's the thing, on these kind of records, there's not a huge budget. So they don't have a researcher that just goes, okay, for 2 months you're going to scour our records for, So they don't have that. They're like, okay, a lot of the stuff I think they got from Prince Vault, which Prince Vault is exceptional.
You know about the website.
Yeah. The website, the princevault.com or .org, which are a lot of friends of mine, and some of the guys that help work on the book. And their information they have on some of this stuff is dated because it's based on stuff we did from the Vault and Uptown. They also know the current dates that I have in my book, but since they've helped me, they've decided to hold off on publishing the stuff until after the book's out. Okay. As a courtesy, they're going to wait a couple weeks after the book comes out before they, or a little longer maybe, to be able to put the
update some of this.
Yeah, and I think that's fair because you want to have the book have some exclusive stuff to it. You want people to look at it and go, oh, okay. And the Prince Vault is freaking great. I mean, these guys do it for free, but I think Warner Brothers looked at the Prince Vault and just didn't do research beyond that. And I think the funny thing is, and I say this all the time, I think every book out there owes a debt of gratitude to the Prince Vault and to the Vault, the Pierre Nelson book and stuff, and they don't credit them. And it's shocking to me because if they say that they did all this research on their own, I can't imagine that they went and did the same research. All this stuff stems from Uptown and things like that, and that kind of stuff. Not all research, but just that kind of the dates and stuff like that stem from that. And I think that I'm surprised sometimes that authors and TV shows and movies and whatever else don't credit
due diligence.
Well, yeah, just saying respect. We got our information from this, and I think that the Warner Brothers album got information from that because some of the dates were dated. And but that said, I still think they did a great job with first off getting it out. the fact they got something out, you got to respect that if nothing else, because nothing else has happened. You know, if we were only going to have Moonbeam Levels for the next 2 or 3 years, I was like, okay, come on. This guy's got 100 years of albums to release. Some good, some not quite as good.
I'll let you say that.
No, I'm not saying. I'll say that because I think that there's certain songs that I think there's a reason why they're in the vault.
Interesting.
I don't think that everything. I don't think everything he did was perfect. But that's an artist. An artist will try things and they don't work. Right. Try different styles that don't work. Try how many times you see somebody try a haircut that doesn't work. But you got to give them props for trying the haircut. But the haircut isn't the one they give it back to. You know. So that's just my thought. I mean, other people say, "Oh, that's the greatest song he ever did," and
it's art, so it's relative,
right? And that's the cool thing about Prince, also, is because you and I may disagree about a song, but the cool thing is there's that song for one of us to like. Right. I don't necessarily have to like everything he did. Sometimes songs speak to me. Sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. I'm a big David Bowie fan, but there's albums he did that I'm going, I can't listen to this. Okay. I like a lot of bands, but there's times I'm going, yeah, just different path.
Right.
And so if there's full albums by Prince that I'm not as fond of right now, there's bound to be albums in the vault that I'm going to be not as fond of, because I can't say that every song of Prince is my favorite song. So there has to be a hierarchy of songs that I like and don't like. There are some lower on the scale, and that's all. But that said, I would not say that he should not record them or that you should not enjoy them, because that's the cool thing about Prince is some people love his jazzy stuff, some people love his instrumental, some people love his funk, some people love his rock, but he's got all that to choose, and he made his own genre of music.
And this is a question, and I'm glad we have an author. And this is one of the, I don't want to say issues. I don't have issues with anybody, but some of the earlier Prince books, I would, like you, I read most of them, not all of them. The ones that I sometimes scratch my head and I'm like, is when they go from, they'll be like the facts. This is what happened here, and that's what happened. But this song here on this album was Luckluster or something, and I'm like, I get your opinion, but sometimes I feel like maybe if this book is about facts and telling the story, you sort of inserting, So talk to me about that. Okay.
I make documentaries for a living.
Okay.
And I did not understand certain things about this. And let's say I'm making a documentary and I'm showing some guy smiling, and I'm talking about the fact that he murdered his family. You're thinking, God, that guy's an animal. Okay. So because you've juxtaposed this. But if you saw him in jail, you're like, or you see him feeding the homeless and he accidentally killed a family, you're like, oh, I feel sorry for that guy. Okay. It's the author or the creator of whatever it is can put their opinion in there without you knowing it. Sometimes it's a little more egregious. If they say, this is a little more lackluster, or, he obviously wasn't trying, it's their opinion and they are the author. Right. So it's here's the thing. It's not saying don't listen to this. Right. I don't think I did that as much, but there are times I felt like that. And there's times I'm going, I really don't like the song, but at the same time, I know there's other people who may like a certain song, and I'm like, that song deserves as much information about it as the song I love. Okay. So that's not fair for me to kind of, say, well, you're only going to hear a sentence about this song because I'm going to stamp my feet.
That would be.
But I think that the author has the right to give their opinion because they're writing a book, and the book is their perspective on this. No matter what, a book is going to be the facts filtered through the author.
Okay.
And he's going to guide you to an author is going to take you on a journey, and the journey may include where he wants you to go. Sometimes a little more subtle,
right?
Sometimes it's a little more obvious. And I think what you're saying is when it's too obvious, it's a punch in the head, and you don't want to hear somebody preaching to you about whether you should like a song.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a subjective type of thing. And sometimes I like to look at, so if I read a person's book, particularly if it's like, I guess it's about art, or I do the same thing with movies. I look at this person and say, well, what kind of movies does he like? Mm-hmm. Because I like action movies, and maybe he's this Oscar bait guy, and he'll look at this action movie and shit on it because that's not what he's into. So sometimes I'll think about when I'm reading some of these music books, I'm like, well, let me see, how can I find out what he's into? So that'll let me know when I'm reading it. I can understand.
I think I used to watch Siskel and Ebert. Yeah. And I know they both like Purple Rain.
Yes.
And so that was something that helped me. But there's times they may not like a movie that I like, or people are going to, there's going to be people that are paid to be a critic.
Sure.
And so they're kind of like the gateway, and you're hoping that like you said, let me see your track record and see if we agree up until this point, that may influence it. But I think what's good is by them at least talking about this stuff, it gives you a chance to go back and look at whatever they're talking about and say, you know what, I went back and listened to that song, and I think he was wrong about this, and and this is why. I kind of feel the same way. I don't want to hear too many opinions, especially if you're writing a book that's about facts. But I mean, I just read a book about the Wright Brothers, and I'm sure there was some opinions in there that are hidden that I'm like going, Orville was the smart one, or whatever it was, But it was like, it might have been hidden, by playing him off as a little more like Fredo than Sonny, So I don't know. Maybe sometimes it's a little more subtle. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
And I think it's interesting too, because we're at a time now where like everything there's a niche for everything. There's almost a lane for anything. Like you could be I review only these types of albums, and there's an audience that only wants to hear about you just talk about that. And I think with Prince, which is so unique, is that he does all these different styles. So you can't really be like, well, I only talk about funk. Well, he's not only just doing funk, or I only like pop or something. He's sort of crossing all of this stuff, man.
This is what's so cool about him, is because he does pop flawlessly, funk flawlessly, rock flawlessly. I'm not as much of a fan of his slower songs, but
interview's over. Let's get out.
Good
this
day,
is what
sir.
I was talking about.
I said good day. No, but I'm not as much of a fan of his slower songs.
I got you.
But I still enjoy them.
Okay.
Again, I'm going to put my things are like, I like his driving songs, his Let's Go Crazies and things like that. I enjoy those, but that's just my thing.
Sure.
I try not to make that. I try not to tell anybody else what they like. There's sometimes he's got some really good slow songs that I'm like, God, that's good.
So we're just kind of breaking down the genres.
Yeah, the genres. Yeah, the different genres he's got.
Arguably jazz, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I not just arguably. I think he does do jazz. You get later on with News and the Rainbow Children and stuff like that. That's more of a jazz thing. And there's some jazz, really potent jazz on the family stuff. Yes is one of my favorite songs. I know it's great, and Susanna Pajamas, but it's so good.
I used to jam those two songs. I had the 45 with it must have been Screams of Passion.
Yeah.
Susanna.
So good.
I used to I was like, I didn't know it was Prince. I was like, what is this? This is so funky. And then when I
so good,
like,
it's so good, and it's a gateway. It's the marijuana. It's exactly. You're going, I'll try a little bit of that. And the next thing you do, you're into something much heavier. I love his jazz. I love that influence. And like I said, his dad, his dad influenced him. And then Eric comes along and helps that along. And Eric's fantastic. I think there's certain people that influenced him drastically. Mm-hmm. Wendy and Lisa, I think, were huge influences from him. I think Eric Leeds. I think Sheila was a huge influence from him. Just throwing him in different directions that people didn't expect. And I think that he was one of these guys that would find his muse in several different things. Okay. And whether it was a girl he was dating or whether it was a musician that he enjoyed jamming with, he'd take Eric and jam with him, or he'd take Sheila and just kind of say, okay, let's just play. And Morris he'd bring in and say, okay, just start riffing, and we'll come up with Tricky. We'll come up, whatever it was. And Tricky's not a song that would have been, normal, but it's just him goofing off. And so I talk about Tricky in here, about recording Tricky, and it's fun to hear the stories about what they were doing. They just gotten back from a concert and they're laughing, and they're just like in the best mood. And this is during a time when everybody else was saying that Morris and Prince were fighting.
Okay, wow.
Because it was after they filmed Purple Rain when everybody was saying they were not getting along. Well, the fall, the spring, they were getting along enough. They were old friends, and there were times that they, like every friend, you got friends you get along for a while and you have problems. But during this period when they were working on that album, Prince and Morris were pretty tight. And still, they go in the studio and do My Drawers, and which is great. I know. I actually one of these people that really likes the Ice Cream Castle album.
I love. So now I got to ask you this.
Okay.
Was it Blast from the Past? Such and such.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I'm sorry. Blast from Back to the Future.
As I said, good day, sir.
There was I'll say it. Okay. There was a instrumental version of Ice Cream Castles that I'm listening to. You might not have heard it, but that blows me away, man. Like, I listen.
Talk about that in the book.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's that was done on a day that he went in the studio with Morris and Jesse Johnson.
Okay.
And they're all just playing. And I think part of that is based on a song that Jesse and Morris had worked on called Old and Ignorant.
Old and Ignorant.
Oh man, that was something they'd worked on, I think, in Minneapolis, as I recall. And I don't know all the details on that, but they brought that to Prince. And Prince said, okay, let's see what we do with this. And they did the instrumental on one day, and then Prince took the tape home that night, wrote the lyrics up to it. And the lyrics come from, part of it is based on something from Joni Mitchell, from a song where she says, "An ice cream castle's in the air." And was that her
I haven't heard some of her this music.
Yeah, but I think that's what it's from. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think that's what it was from. So then the next day they recorded that. So it's that kind of stuff that to me makes the song alive to me, and I love knowing where the stuff came from, and knowing the engineer that worked on this stuff. And I interviewed Peggy McCreary, who was his big engineer. Peggy Mack, she was his engineer for a long time. In fact, when Susan started, Susan Rogers, there were very few female engineers, and she saw Peggy Mack, and she's like, she see her names on albums, and go, I want to be like her. And then, then she got the job, and so it was her influence. So those kind of people talking about this stuff, and the reason why I wanted to do the engineers is because the engineers were only the people are only exclusively in the studio with him alone. Mm-hmm. Other musicians may come in and out; they're there for certain periods, but the engineer is there from setup to finish. Mm-hmm. Except for recording vocals, they're in the studio with him. And that's nuts to imagine sitting there. And Peggy even said in the book, sometimes it was really boring, and I'm thinking, what? You're in the studio with Prince? You're saying that's boring? And she's like, yeah, you're in there 14, 15 hours a day. Yeah, it gets tiring. And I'm like, oh my God, I'd love to have that kind of tired. But that's,
I think anything after a certain amount of time, and it's not, it's just the raw going through it over and over.
Yeah. I mean, especially him. And the thing is, he wasn't a perfectionist. People say he was a perfectionist. I don't think he was. He would sometimes accommodate mistakes. If there was a jingle or something like that happened, machine is messing up, he said, that's the way it's supposed to be. Keep going. And that's part of what made his music alive. And I think the cool thing about him is he's able to take something. He has goosebump music. As you know, you listen to it and you go, I'm getting goose flesh on this. And usually you only get that when people are playing together, because when it's collective, you get that feeling of all of them working together for a thing. But if one guy can do that, that's impressive to me, that he can conjure all the spirits into that song on all the different instruments and make it seem like there's an urgency to it. And I think that's what live music feels like to me. Live music feels urgent. Okay. Like, we're on a tightrope here. I don't know if we're gonna make it. And they do, and it's like, oh my God, that's great. He's like that with that, and I think that's what gives me the goosebumps about some of his music. I know it sounds goofy to say goosebumps, but it really is to me.
What obviously Prince is not here, and I'm sort of wrapping this up a little bit, but what do you want? What would you want people to know about Prince? And I ask that because this book that you're doing is one of those things that sort of helps contextualize, this particular period and give more details. And to me, I wasn't joking when I said it's an educational type of thing, because for guys like me, it's this is the guidebook to sort of show Dave, like, wow, okay. If and I said this on another show, if I'd have had books like this when I was recording, it'd have been a wrap, because I would have had a guide point and said, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. He went in the studio that day, we go in the studio every day. Well, how did I do it? Hey, he did it. So when I say that, what do you want people to know?
2 or 3 things. First thing, he was a very charitable man.
Okay.
And incredibly charitable, and in a way that people don't always get, because he kept that secret. As you know, with working with the PRN Alumni Foundation, there is a huge amount of charity that he did that people don't know. And I talk about that in the book as much as possible. I think that's something that really needs to be talked about because everybody knows his music and everybody can dance to his stuff and everybody does, live performance and stuff like this. And there's not much I can add to talking about him live and things like that because he was just as good as he gets, as good as anybody gets. But his charitable work is a big one. His humor, I think you talk to enough of these people and they'll tell you he's funny as hell. And I think one of them said he was as funny as Eddie Murphy. And he could have been Eddie Murphy. And you just look at this guy thinking, he's got that too. Great.
Yeah, you see it in flourishes.
Oh, yeah. You see little bits here and there. And you see the smirk. And you're like going, I get it. And, and part of it is a rich guy's jokes are always funny. I get that. But when I think he let his guard down with people, that he could be genuinely funny and charming and witty and clever and dirty or whatever it was and make you laugh. And I think that's something that gets lost in the mix. And I think the other thing that really I think the book does talk about is the guy was a workaholic and knew that you don't get great by not working on it. You have to work. And going to the studio, he would religiously, you'll see, daily. And then in September of 83, he doesn't take a day off until like the 21st or 22nd of that month. And every day he's just doing it. And you're going, nobody does that. Now, but the Beatles, the book about the Beatles like this, which inspired my book. And you see patches, and then they're not there. And then patches. But Prince literally is doing this. And the days that he's not there, he's probably somewhere else doing something else about music. And there's days that he's doing a concert, that he's in the studio recording something, then he goes to the concert, and then afterwards, or does sound checks that end up becoming a song. I talk about Temptation. In Temptation, he was doing a sound check, and then after the show on the Purple Rain tour in the beginning of December 7th actually, and he is working on this, and he got to the point where he said, you know what, this isn't working playing with a band, and he pulls Eddie M, and he pulls a few other people and says, we're going back to Los Angeles. And they went back to Los Angeles and they checked out the Jackson's Victory Tour while they were there. Wow. And that kind of stuff's cool too. Couldn't find out what he's doing there. He had an interest in Michael Jackson. But then they went back into Sunset Sound and said, you know what, we're going to record Temptation. Now they know the song. And he had Eddie playing the sax on it and doing things like he's running past the microphone with his sax and things like that. And you're going, just want to get crazy sounds. And when you hear these people, exactly, you hear the person who plays saxophone, and you hear the person that came in to play harp or something like that. There's a story about an old woman that he hired to play harp on Possessed, and you're just going, was it on Possessed? Might have been on Possessed, but they brought her into the studio like 2 a.m, and is this nice older lady that had a gown on, and just she's playing the notes for him. And he's like. She said, what do you think? And he's like, you ain't doing it for me, lady. And you're just like, he's got something in his head that he has to get out.
Right.
And he can't get it out. Sometimes he can't get it out through somebody else. And so that's why he'll take your bass and say, this is how it's supposed to be. Or he'll take the drum and say, get out of the way. And you're just going, the fact that he can do that and convey his stuff. I mean, Michael Jackson, you saw This Is It, and you saw at the end of that when he's talking, and he's doing, you go,
it's supposed to go like this.
Exactly, but he's not grabbing the guy's instrument and going, dude, and Prince would do that. Pardon me, let me get to the keyboards and saying, and do like this, and you're just going, there's nobody that does that, and that's what I really hope it comes off in this book. And if I can do more books, I'll be happy to do more books. I would love to do 10 books about Prince like this, about his studio sessions. This is just a 2-year period, and it's 500 pages.
Right.
There's other periods. This just happens to be his biggest selling period,
right.
Not necessarily his best period.
If I had a request, so 85 to 86 or something like that.
I've already started working on a second book.
Okay.
That's 85 and 86, which is, again, it's all the stuff that he was recording for Parade, Sign of the Times. Around the World in a Day is done at the end of the first book. It's completely done. That's basically how the book ends, is he finishes Around the World in a Day.
Yeah. So. The stuff that blows me out forever will be the crystal ball stuff, Sign of the Times.
Second book.
all that. That's just like,
well, if there's enough, if the first book sells enough, there will be a second book. It's just it's a matter of making sure that it's a time-consuming thing writing a book.
Imagine you said you took
20 years. I'm not going to take 20 years in the second book. I'll be an old man by
20 years.
My heir's doing it. Yeah, I think that now that I've got the information, I think that I can start formatting it a little bit. When I interviewed people for several different periods of his life, so it wasn't like just this. And some people I've interviewed have passed away. Claire Fisher I interviewed passed away. Tom Tucker, who was an engineer later, passed away. David Coleman passed away. I've interviewed Vanity. She passed away. There wasn't anything really in that interview I could use, but she talked enough in other places. So, the thing is, and we found out with Prince dying that this stuff can all be taken away real quick, and it makes you sad because his story wasn't done. His story wasn't done. He had work to do, and he was in mid-sentence as far as I'm concerned. And all of a sudden you're like going, wait, what? This guy was the guy we all thought was really healthy, and this I'm hoping helps his legacy and people understand that the guy was driven, and the guy was. It's almost like he knew he had a limited time, and he had to get this stuff out of him. Okay. And so, that to me is his story is just a guy that was more creative than anybody, and understood that it requires actually doing it. Well done is better than well said, and you can talk about something all day long, and I'd pay attention to the guy that did it as opposed to the guy that's talking about it. Gotcha. He was the guy that did it, so that's my thing.
All right. Well, you're one of the guys who did it with this book coming out, and again, this November 15th. Yes. Prince and the Purple Rain Era Studio Sessions 1983 and 1984. Duane Tudahl, excuse me. I was thinking of Snoop Dogg. Tudahl, but Tudahl. I imagine you can go right now and pre-order this book,
yes,
right?
You can order it on Amazon right now. Just look up my name, Duane Tudahl. Okay. Tudahl. There's also a Facebook group called right. Prince Complete Studio Sessions book series. Sign up for that because I usually get my updates about the book and things like that directly there. I've also had coupons in there to get the book a little cheaper through the publisher, 30% off coupon, which still is active. So if somebody wants to do that, and also say hi to me. Say hi because if you, I love hearing from people. I love knowing what people want because if I'm going to do more of these things, I want to know what you like. Right. If you don't, now apparently I can't put my opinions in these books.
I didn't say that. Here we go. Well, man, appreciate you coming on the show and doing this face to face. That's really cool, man. So thank you. Then again,
and you laid a nice tray of food for me too. It's fantastic.
Well, I don't have a budget, man. Sweet, so man. Water is good.
Very nice.
But you guys make sure you get this book. Go out. I'll put a link on the show notes so you can order it. It's a must get. I've read a couple of chapters and I already know it's a must. You have to have it. It's one of those books that there's a lot of Prince books out there. I don't co-sign all of them, but this one looks like this is one of those ones. And I'm the guy who's like, yo, Prince. What was that? The first peer book called? It was Prince.
DMSR?
No, there was the one.
Oh, the documentary.
The documentary.
Yes.
I used to had that book, and then I got the other ones that came out, and this feels like that same style. So definitely go check that out. This is the Prince Podcast. My name is Michael Dean. You already know what I'm going to say. Work it like a job. We will see you.